Look at the map. Look at the headlines. Look at the alliances forming in the most volatile region on the face of the earth. Not 50 years ago, not a decade ago, right now. An alliance is gathering in the exact configuration that an ancient prophet saw 2,600 years ago. His name was Ezekiel, and what he saw coming toward the Middle East should terrify you. But more than that, it should prepare you. Because here is what most people sitting in church have never been told. The wars and rumors of wars flashing across your television screens are not random geopolitical conflicts. They are not just the result of modern diplomacy of failing. They are the stage being set for an event so massive, so catastrophic, that it will fundamentally alter the course of human history. Ezekiel was not just a priest in exile. He was a watchman, and God showed him everything. Everything you are watching on the news today, Ezekiel saw first, and the Bible confirms it. That is not a theory. That is not speculation. In chapters 38 and 39 of his book, Ezekiel names specific nations, specific ancient territories, and describes a massive coalition forming in the extreme north, descending upon the Middle East. For centuries, scholars read these texts and dismiss them. They asked, how could nations that have historically hated each other, nations with entirely different ideologies and religions, ever unite in a single military and economic alliance? But look around you. Look at the agreements being signed behind closed doors today. Look at the powers of the North and the East shaking hands, forming treaties, and moving their pieces into the exact borders Ezekiel described. The alliance of Magog is not a distant myth waiting to happen. It is a present reality. The sequence Ezekiel recorded is in motion right now in the world you are living in today. Now, before we walk through exactly who these nations are and what their awakening means, you need to understand something about what Ezekiel saw, because it changes everything about the weight of this prophecy. This is not just a war over land, oil, or resources. This is a divine appointment. In Ezekiel 38:4, the Lord God says to Gog, I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army. God is not reacting to the headlines. He is orchestrating them. And if the depth of what God is revealing through prophetic scripture means something to you, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Share this video with someone who is searching for answers in a world that feels completely out of control. Because what is coming in this series is too important for only one person to hear. The shifting of the Middle East has begun, and the first nation Ezekiel identified is making its move. To understand the future, you must first unmask the players. Ezekiel 38:2 identifies the leader of this coming storm as Gog, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. For centuries, these names were shrouded in mystery, hidden behind the veil of ancient history. But today, the veil is gone. When you look at the geography Ezekiel described, the uttermost parts of the north, there is only one power that fits. only one nation sits directly north of Jerusalem, stretching across the vast wilderness of the Eurasian continent. That nation is Russia. This is not a political statement. This is a geographical fact. Ancient historians like Josephus confirmed that the descendants of Magog settled in the regions we now know as the modern Russian Federation. But look closer. Ezekiel calls him the chief prince of Rosh. The word Rosh in Hebrew literally means head or chief, but many scholars see it as the root of the name Russia. For 2,600 years, this prophecy sat dormant, waiting for a time when Russia would become a global superpower with its eyes fixed on the mountains of Israel. That time is not coming. That time is here. But why now? Why is the Magog awakening happening in your lifetime? Look at the shift in the atmosphere. Just as you might look in the mirror and see the lines of fatigue on your face, the physical signs of an internal struggle, the earth itself is showing signs of a deep, prophetic exhaustion. The leadership of the North is changing. Their rhetoric is hardening. Their alliances are shifting from the West to the Middle East. Ezekiel said this leader would have a thought come into his mind to devise an evil plan. Think about the hooks in the jaws I mentioned. What is pulling a superpower from the North down into the sand and heat of the Middle East? It's not just land. It's not just influence. It is a desperate economic and strategic necessity. Russia has established a permanent military presence in Syria, on the very borders of Israel, for the first time in human history. They are not there for peace. They are there because the hooks are digging in. Do you feel the tension? You should. Because when a predator of this magnitude moves, the whole world trembles. Most people see a headline about a military base or a new treaty and they look away. They think it's just another cycle of history. But you are watching the chief prince take his position. You are watching the literal fulfillment of a 2,600-year-old warning. The Bible said they would come from the north, and there they are, standing at the door. But Magog does not come alone. Ezekiel saw a coalition, a group of nations that have no business being together, yet they are united by a single dark purpose. And the next nation on Ezekiel's list is the one that should make your heart skip a beat, because this nation was once a friend of the West, but now it has become the spiritual and military engine of the Magog alliance. Its name has changed, but its ancient fire is burning hotter than ever. We are going to unmask the second player, the nation once known as Persia. And what they are building right now is the final piece of the puzzle. If Russia is the head of this coming beast, the second nation mentioned in Ezekiel's ancient list is its beating fiery heart. Ezekiel 38:5 starts with one simple, unmistakable word, Persia. For thousands of years, that name was synonymous with grandeur, empire, and ancient wisdom. But if you look at a map today, you won't find a country named Persia. You will find Iran. And inside that name change lies a prophetic mystery that should stop you in your tracks. Think about the physiognomy of the Middle East right now. Just as a doctor looks at the sudden discoloration of the skin or the swelling of a joint to diagnose a hidden, life-threatening condition, we must look at the spiritual and political face of Iran. Until 1979, Iran was one of the strongest allies of the West. It was a close friend of Israel. It was a modern, secular nation. No political analyst in the world could have predicted that this nation would ever align itself with a northern power like Russia to march against the Holy Land. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a historical absurdity. But Ezekiel saw it. He saw it 2,600 years before the Islamic Revolution flipped the world upside down in a single year. He saw the shift in the eyes of the nation, from friendship to a blinding ideological rage. This is not just a coincidence of history, it is a divine alignment. Ezekiel 38:5 says they will be with them, meaning Persia will be in total military and ideological lockstep with Magog. Look at the swelling of influence stretching across the region. Iran has built a land bridge from Tehran to the Mediterranean Sea, moving through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. It is as if a web of darkness is being woven right before our eyes. Why is a radical religious theocracy in Tehran sharing weapons, technology, and intelligence with a secular military powerhouse in Moscow? They have different gods. They have different languages. They have different dreams for the world. Yet they are united by a singular, dark purpose that the Bible identified before their ancestors even built their cities. Just as wrinkles on the face reveal the stress within the heart, the stress in the Middle East, the drones, the missiles, the proxy wars, reveals that the Magog awakening is reaching its full measure. You are witnessing the odd couple of prophecy, standing shoulder to shoulder. The heart is pumping the blood of war to the limbs of the alliance. The Bible didn't just guess they would exist. It declared they would unite. And today, for the first time in human history, they are inseparable. The Word of God is being validated not in a library, but in the deserts and command centers of the Middle East. The alignment is complete. The heart is ready. Look south, past the burning sands of the Arabian Peninsula, across the Red Sea, and into the vast, turbulent landscapes of Africa. Ezekiel's vision was not limited to the superpowers of the north or the fiery heart of Persia. He saw the flanks, he saw the limbs of the alliance gathering in the high heat of the African continent. Ezekiel 38:5 identifies them clearly. Cush and Put with them, all of them with shield and helmet. For decades, modern historians looked at these regions, modern-day Sudan and Libya, and saw only chaos, poverty, and internal strife. They asked, how could these broken nations ever participate in a high-tech, global military assault led by Russia? But that is the arrogance of human political analysis. God does not look at a nation's GDP. He looks at its alignment. And today, the alignment of Cush and Put is shifting with a speed that is mathematically impossible to ignore. Think about the physiognomy of this alliance. If Magog is the head and Persia is the heart, Cush and Put are the talons. Just as a predator extends its claws before the strike. We are watching these African nations being pulled into the orbit of the North. Look at Sudan, Kush. What do you see? You see a nation torn by civil war, a vacuum of power. And who is filling that vacuum? It is the mercenaries of Magog. It is Russian influence, securing gold mines and naval ports on the Red Sea. They are not there for humanitarian aid. They are there to sharpen the shield and helmet Ezekiel described. Now, look at Libya. For years, it has been a gateway of instability. But look at who is standing on its shores today. You see Russian fighter jets. You see Iranian advisors. You see a nation that was once a quiet Mediterranean neighbor transformed into a strategic launchpad for the alliance of the North. Why? Because Put is the western flank. Kush is the southern flank. They are encircling the target. They are closing the ring. Do you feel the weight of this? Most people hear news about a coup in Africa or a new Russian base in the desert and they think it is distant. They think it doesn't affect their life in America or Europe. But Ezekiel saw these nations with them. He saw them in total unity with Russia and Iran. He saw them armed and ready for a single specific day. Just as a darkening sky tells you, a storm is no longer a possibility, but a certainty, the African connection tells you that the Magog awakening is reaching its final stage. The limbs are attached, the talons are extended. The world calls it regional instability. The Bible calls it the gathering of the shields. You are not watching a series of random events. You are watching a 2,600-year-old blueprint being built in real time. The flanks are ready. The circle is almost complete. Move your eyes northwest, away from the oil fields of Iran and the deserts of Libya, to the land that acts as the physical and spiritual bridge between East and West. Ezekiel 38:6 adds two more names to this terrifying roster: Gomer and all his hordes, Beth Togarmah from the uttermost parts of the north with all his hordes, many peoples with you. For most of the 20th century, if you looked at this region, specifically modern-day Turkey and the Turkic nations of Central Asia, you saw a wall. Turkey was the secular darling of NATO, the Western gatekeeper against the Soviet North. It was a bridge to Europe, not a path for invasion. But look at the physiognomy of Turkey today. Just as a face changes when an old friend becomes a stranger, the political and spiritual expression of Turkey has transformed into something Ezekiel recognized 2,600 years ago. If Magog is the head and Persia is the heart, Gomer is the shoulder. It is the pivot point. It is the land that must bear the weight of the crossing. Historically, Gomer represents the Cimmerians who settled in central and western Turkey. Beth Togarmah represents the tribes of the Armenian and Caucasian regions, the uttermost north relative to Israel. For decades, it was unthinkable that Turkey, a member of NATO, would ever align itself with Russia and Iran. It was a strategic impossibility. But look at the headlines you're seeing right now. Look at the trilateral summits. You see the leaders of Russia, Iran, and Turkey sitting at the same table, holding hands, and discussing the future of the Middle East without a single Western representative in the room. This is the Brotherhood of the East coming to life. Why is a NATO ally buying Russian missile systems? Why are they coordinating military movements with the fiery heart of Persia? Because the spirit of Gomer is awakening. The secular mask is falling off, revealing an ancient Islamic ambition that hates the current world order just as much as Magog does. Just as you might notice a subtle change in someone's posture before they stand up to leave, we are watching Turkey posture itself away from the West and toward the alliance of the North. Think about the sheer scale of what is being built, from the mountains of Russia to the plains of Anatolia, from the streets of Tehran to the coasts of Libya. A wall of nations is being constructed. Every single country Ezekiel mentioned is now, for the first time in history, in a military and economic partnership. This isn't a theory, it's a map. It's a reality being validated by every diplomatic cable and satellite image. Ezekiel called it many peoples with you. He saw a crowd. He saw a swarm. Just as the darkening of the sky precedes the first crack of thunder, the uniting of the bridge tells you the preparation is over. The head, the heart, the limbs, and the shoulders are all in place. The body of the beast is fully formed. You are watching the literal assembly of the end-time army, and the world is calling it geopolitics. But you know the truth. The bridge is crossed. The alliance is complete. The awakening is here. Everything we have discussed, the gathering of the North, the fiery heart of Persia, the African flanks, all of it is a physical manifestation of a spiritual decision. In Ezekiel 38:10, the text reveals a chilling internal shift. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. This is the brain of the Magog awakening. It is the moment the posture of war becomes a plan of action. But what is the trigger? What evil thought could be so powerful that it compels a global coalition to march toward the mountains of Israel? Think about the physiognomy of greed. Just as a predator's pupils dilate when it locks onto its prey, the eyes of the Magog alliance are dilating as they look at the prosperity of the Holy Land. Ezekiel 38:12 tells us exactly what they are after: to seize spoil and carry off plunder. For decades, skeptics mocked this prophecy. They looked at Israel, a tiny nation with no oil, no gold, and few natural resources, and said, "Why would Russia or Iran bother? There is no spoil worth a world war." But look at the face of Israel today. The desert has bloomed. The wasteland has become the high-tech hub of the world. And then came the discovery that changed the geopolitical DNA of the region: the Leviathan and Tamar gas fields. Massive, multi-trillion-dollar energy reserves sitting right off the coast of Israel. Suddenly the nation that had nothing has everything the North desperately needs. Russia, a nation whose power is built on energy dominance, now sees a competitor in the Mediterranean. They see a prize. They see a spoil that could solve their economic crises and cement their control over Europe forever. The evil thought is no longer a mystery. It is a calculated, economic necessity. But there is a second part to this thought. Ezekiel says they will go against a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. Look at the physiognomy of modern Israel. For the first time in history, Israel is not a land of walled cities like it was in ancient times. It is a land of open kibbutzim, high-tech cities, and unwalled villages. Despite the Iron Dome and the high-tech fences, there is a sense of dwelling securely. The Alliance sees this security as a weakness. They see a people who believe they have finally found peace, and they devise a scheme to shatter it in a single, overwhelming strike. Do you see the darkness behind the eyes of the headlines? When you hear about energy deals, pipeline disputes, or the economic isolation of the North, you are hearing the whispers of the evil thought. It is the moment greed outweighs fear. It is the moment the hooks in the jaws begin to pull. The Bible didn't just predict a war. It predicted a motive. It predicted the exact economic and social conditions that would make an invasion irresistible. Just as a sudden drop in barometric pressure tells you a hurricane is forming, the economic envy of the world toward Israel tells you the scheme is being devised. The mind is made up. The plan is set. The spoil is identified. You are watching a superpower prepare to gamble its entire future on a single evil thought. And the target, the center of the world, is right in their crosshairs. Jerusalem is not just a city on a hill. It is a portal. It is the geographic and spiritual epicenter of the human story. In Ezekiel 38:12, the prophet uses a word that should shake every historian and geographer to their core. He describes the people of Israel as those who live at the center of the land. In the original Hebrew, that word is tabr. It literally means the navel or the umbilicus of the earth. Think about the physiognomy of a body. The navel is the point of origin. It is the center of gravity. Just as all the vital systems of a developing life are connected to that single point, all the vital veins of human history, global trade, and spiritual warfare are connected to this tiny sliver of land. Why does the entire world, 8 billion people, obsess over a territory the size of New Jersey? Why does every major power, from the ancient Romans to the modern Magog alliance, feel a magnetic, irrational pull toward these specific mountains? Because you cannot control the world if you do not control its center. The physiognomy of the earth reveals that Israel is the heart, and the heart is currently under siege. But look at the expression of the world right now. Look at the international assemblies. Look at the voting records of the nations. Just as a face grows cold and distant before a betrayal, the world is growing cold toward Israel. Ezekiel 38:13 identifies a few voices watching from the sidelines. Sheba and Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish, and all her villages. These represent the modern Arab states and the Western maritime powers, the very nations we expect to defend the status quo. And what do they do when the Magog alliance begins its march? Do they send armies? Do they declare war? Do they stand in the gap? No, they ask a question. They say, "Have you come to seize spoil? Have you gathered your hordes to carry off plunder?" That is the sound of prophetic indifference. It is the sound of a world that watches the invasion on a high-definition screen, but refuses to step onto the battlefield. This is the isolation Ezekiel saw 2,600 years ago. He saw a moment when Israel would stand entirely, terrifyingly alone. No NATO, no superpowers, no reliable allies, only a weak, diplomatic inquiry. Are you here for the money? Think about the loneliness of the Holy Land today. The headlines call it international condemnation and strategic distancing. The Bible calls it the preparation for a divine miracle. Just as a single light becomes more brilliant when the room goes completely dark, the destiny of Israel becomes more clear as its earthly support vanishes. The navel of the earth is being exposed. The center is being surrounded. Most people see a political crisis of unprecedented proportions. You see the final stage of a divine setup. The world is stepping back so that God can step in. The stage is empty. The audience is silent. The center of the world is waiting for the first footfall of the north. The alliance has reached the mountains. The many peoples are standing at the gates. The world is silent, and Israel is alone. At this exact moment, when human logic dictates that the story is over, Ezekiel records a shift in the atmosphere of heaven that defies every law of warfare. Ezekiel 38:18 declares, "This is what will happen in that day. When Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord." Think about the physiognomy of divine fury. Just as a human face flushes red and the veins tighten before a sudden explosive reaction, the very fabric of creation begins to flush with the presence of God. This is not a diplomatic response. This is not a calculated military counterstrike. This is a supernatural convulsion of the earth itself. Ezekiel 38:19 describes a great earthquake in the land of Israel, so massive that the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and every human being on the face of the earth will tremble at his presence. The mountains will be overturned. The cliffs will crumble. Every wall will fall to the ground. But look at the mechanism of the collapse. God does not just send fire from heaven. He sends confusion. Ezekiel 38:21 reveals a terrifying psychological breakdown within the Magog alliance. Every man's sword will be against his brother. Think about the physiognomy of the alliance we unmasked. Russia, Iran, Turkey, Libya, Sudan. They are united by hatred, not by love. They are held together by a hook, not by a common soul. When the earth begins to shake and the sky begins to burn, that fragile unity shatters. In the darkness and the dust of the crumbling mountains, the alliance turns on itself. The head strikes the heart. The heart stabs the limbs. The many peoples become their own executioners. This is the divine paradox. The very size of the alliance, the massive swarm of soldiers that made them feel invincible, becomes their greatest liability. In the confusion, they become a self-consuming beast. And then, the elements themselves join the battle. Ezekiel describes plague, torrential rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur. It is as if the immune system of the planet is attacking a foreign infection. Do you feel the shift in the weight of this message? Most people watch the news and fear the strength of the North. They fear the missiles of Iran or the hordes of Gomer. But Ezekiel saw their end before they even began their march. He saw that their awakening was actually a summons to their own funeral, just as a fever is the body's way of burning out a virus. The fury of Ezekiel is God's way of cleansing the center of the land from those who sought to plunder it. The purpose of this supernatural collapse is not just the protection of a nation, it is the revelation of a name. Ezekiel 38:23 concludes, "And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord." The silence of heaven is broken. The prophetic indifference of the world is shattered. You are watching the moment where history ceases to be a series of human accidents and becomes a divine demonstration. The hook has pulled. The alliance has fallen. The king has spoken. The smoke of the divine fury has finally cleared. The mountains of Israel, once swarming with the many peoples of the north, are now silent. But this is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of a graveyard. Ezekiel 39 moves us into a phase of history that is almost impossible for the modern mind to grasp. It is the physiognomy of restoration. Just as a body must undergo a grueling process of detoxification after a life-threatening infection, the Holy Land begins a 7-year and 7-month cycle of purging. Look at the residue of the Magog awakening. Ezekiel 39:9 describes a scene that baffles every modern military strategist. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use the weapons for fuel and burn them up. The small and large shields, the bows and arrows, the war clubs and spears. For 7 years, they will use them for fuel. Think about the physiognomy of energy. For 2,600 years, skeptics asked, how can you burn steel, titanium, and modern composites for 7 years? But today, we live in an era of high-energy polymers and volatile fuels. What Ezekiel saw was a total shift in the world's economy. The weapons designed to destroy the center of the world are repurposed to sustain it. The spoil the invaders sought has been reversed. Their very tools of death become the source of warmth and life for the people they try to annihilate. But there is a darker, more somber side to this cleansing. Ezekiel 39:12-14 tells us that for 7 months the house of Israel will be burying the fallen invaders in order to cleanse the land. They will even hire full-time men to search the valleys, marking every bone they find with a sign until the burial is complete. Think about the physiognomy of holiness. In the Bible, death defiles the land. A land covered in the remains of an invading army is a land that cannot breathe. The 7-month burial is a literal physical exorcism of the soil. Ezekiel names the place the valley of Magog. It will be a monument to human pride and divine sovereignty. Every bone found, every marker placed, is a testimony to the world that you cannot march against the navel of the earth and survive. Just as a scar on the skin tells the story of a wound that has healed, the valley of Magog will be a permanent scar on the geography of the Middle East. A reminder that the Magog awakening ended in a divine sleep. Do you feel the sobriety of this moment? Most prophecy teachers focus only on the fire and the earthquake, but Ezekiel focused on the cleanup. He focused on the long, meticulous process of making the world right again. This 7-year period is a bridge. It is the transition between the age of human rebellion and the age of divine rule. It is the Sabbath of the land after the greatest storm in history. Just as the quietness of a hospital room follows a successful surgery, the 7-year cleanup is the sign that the fever of human geopolitics has finally broken. The head is gone. The heart has stopped. The limbs are buried. You are watching the literal preparation of the earth for its rightful king. The weapons are burning. The land is being cleansed. The old order is being buried bone by bone. And what emerges from the dust of Magog is a world that will never be the same again. We have reached the end of the map. We have unmasked the players, decoded the motives, and witnessed the divine intervention that shatters the Magog alliance. But as the smoke clears and the weapons of the north continue to burn on the mountains of Israel, one question remains, and it is the only question that has ever mattered. Where do you stand? Prophecy is not meant to scare you. It is meant to prepare you. It is not a crystal ball designed to satisfy your curiosity. It is a divine checkup for your soul. Think about the physiognomy of this generation. Just as a person's face reflects their internal health, the face of our world is showing all the signs of a terminal condition. The shaking of the earth, the darkening of the heavens, the hardening of the hearts, and the gathering of the nations are all physical symptoms of a spiritual crisis. You are not watching a series of random geopolitical accidents. You are watching a convergence. Everything Ezekiel saw 2,600 years ago is no longer approaching. It is here. The alliance is formed. The economic triggers are pulled. The isolation of the center of the world is almost complete. The stage is set. The actors are in place, and the curtain is about to rise on the final act of human history. If you have stayed with this series from part 1 to this very moment, it is because your spirit recognizes a weight that your mind cannot fully explain. It is the weight of truth. Think about the fatal point of delay. Most people sitting in church or watching the news think they have more time. They think the Magog awakening is something for their grandchildren to worry about. But the hooks in the jaws are already pulling. The window of grace is not a door that stays open forever. It is a window that is slowly, quietly sliding shut. Just as you might notice the sun beginning to dip below the horizon, the light of grace is reaching its final golden hour. What is your anchor? In a world where the North can move in a day and the global economy can shift in an hour, what is the foundation beneath your feet? Ezekiel saw the collapse of empires and the supernatural fury of God. He saw that the only people who survived the awakening were those who were already awake, spiritually awake, anchored in the Word of God, and hidden in the shadow of the Almighty. This is your final call. Do not wait for the mountains to shake. Do not wait for the evil thought to become a nuclear reality. Today, while the voice of God is still a whisper and not yet a thunderclap of judgment, find your anchor in Jesus Christ. He is the only high ground when the earthquake comes. He is the only peace when the alliance marches. If this message has moved you, if you feel the shaking in your own heart today, then let this be the moment you stop watching and start standing. Surrender your fear to the one who holds the keys to history. Type, "I am standing on the word" in the comments as your declaration. Hit that subscribe button. Share this series with someone who is still sleeping through the storm, and turn on notifications. The Magog awakening has begun. The King is coming. Are you ready?